It was still light when Tim woke, but the sun was beginning to set. A long finger of sunlight came into the tower through the window in the west wall. Tim tossed back the sheepskins and swung his feet onto the floor. He heard the bolts on the door shoot back. The door opened and Weirden came into the room. "So, you're awake," said Weirden. "Marcus will bring you some food soon. I've come to tell you that I shall let you go before long. I have heard from my friends on the mainland that the Moor people are holding a meeting tonight in the hills. Madron has sent messages out to all the families of Moor people who live in the high hills and in the mountains and asked them to meet him in the Hidden Valley." "Have you ever been to the Hidden Valley?" Tim shook his head. "It is a valley in the hills 3 miles from the caves. A path runs through it. There are high cliffs on each side, but the valley opens out into a wide grassy space between the hills and then closes down into a narrow path, where the cliffs begin again. It is a good place for a secret meeting, and a good place for a trap. I'm sending 20 iron men to the far end of the valley where it opens out into the moor. They will hide until the Moor people from the hills come to meet Madron. Once the Moor people have gone into the valley, they will move into place across the path. The Moor people cannot stand against the Iron Men. That end of the valley will be closed. I have another 15 Iron Men on the headland. As soon as the darkness falls, I shall go ashore. The Iron Men will be waiting for me, and we shall follow Madron and his people to the end of the valley. The Moor people will be shut in between 2 armies of Iron Men. They will stand no chance in that battle. Tomorrow, when I have finished with the Moor people, I will set you free. You have been foolish, but you became a thief only to help your friends. I can forgive that. I shall let you go." "But you're not going to kill all the Moor people, are you?" cried Tim. "You couldn't do that." Weirden smiled grimly. "You must remember that I did not seek this fight, Tim," he said. "It is the Moor people who are trying to drive the people of the Moonlight back into the sea. But I shall not kill more of them than I have to. People do die when there is a battle, but I shall take as many prisoners as I can. Then I shall forge irons for their ankles and make them work for me. By the time they have worked for me for 7 years, they'll have learnt their lesson, and I shall let them go." Tim stared at Weirden. "But you can't," he said. "I can, and I will," said Weirden. "Well, I came to see you to tell you that if all goes well, you'll be free tomorrow. I'm going to call the Iron Men together now. Marcus will bring you some food. I'm leaving him here to guard the tower. I will come back to see you again when I get back." He went out, closing the door behind him. Tim heard the bolt shoot into place. He went across to the window. The sun was dropping into the sea. It would soon be dark. Weirden came out onto the rocks below. The Iron Man dressed as a Spaniard was with him. They got into the boat and Weirden pulled it across to the headland. Tim heard the bolts on the door shoot back and Marcus came into the room. He had a big bowl of stew with him and a hunk of brown bread. "Supper," he whispered in his strange husky voice. "Thank you," said Tim. Marcus put the bowl and the bread down on the table. He clanked out of the room. Tim heard him shoot the bolts back on the door. The sun had gone now, and the light was beginning to fade. Tim ate the food. It was another fish stew, but he was hungry, and it tasted very good. When he had finished, he went to the east window and stayed there, gazing out towards the shore until the light faded from the sky and the stars came out. The Moor people would be starting out for the Hidden Valley by this time. Tim wondered whether Morag would be with them, and Aaron. Perhaps Aaron wouldn't be well enough to go, or perhaps they wouldn't want him. Tim hoped that Aaron would be left safely in the caves. But would the caves themselves be safe once the Moor people were taken prisoner? If only he could get away to warn them. Tim wondered for the 100th time what had happened to Sebastian. There was a triumphant purr from the west window. "Arr!" Tim swung round and rushed over to it. There was Sebastian standing on one end of a broomstick, with Aaron sitting behind him on the other end. "Aaron!" cried Tim. "Sebastian!" "Shh," said Aaron. "I think there's an Iron Man about below. I'm pretty sure he hasn't seen us. We came over the sea from the south. We mustn't let him hear us." "I'm so glad to see you, Tim. We saw your signal earlier this morning. I've been so worried about you. Are you alright? Did Weirden hurt you?" "I'm alright," said Tim. "How about you?" "Better," said Aaron. "I'll tell you all about everything later," said Tim. "We haven't a moment to lose. The more people are going to the Hidden Valley and they're walking into a trap. The Iron Men will be waiting for them." He began climbing through the window while he was speaking. "You're alright, Aaron," he whispered as he slid onto his broomstick. "You sure?" "I'm fine," said Aaron. "How did you know about the meeting in the Hidden Valley?" "Weirden told me," said Tim. "Someone told him. He must have spies on the mainland. Have the more people left?" "They left when I did," said Aaron. "Then we haven't much time," said Tim. He settled down in front of Aaron and gripped the broomstick with both hands. "Fly, Sebastian," he said. "Fly as fast as you can. We must catch the more people before they get to the Hidden Valley. But don't let Weirden and his Iron Men see you." Sebastian swung the broomstick towards the shore. His tail waved wildly. They were off. Sebastian flew down until the broomstick was just over the waves. He didn't fly directly to the cove, but kept to the far side of a point to the south. "Sebastian brought me in a big circle tonight," said Aaron. "We flew south for a long way, then out to sea, and then up to Weirden's Island." "We'd better go a bit south going back too," said Tim. "We'd better go to the far end of the Hidden Valley first and warn the more people coming from the hills. The Iron Men are going to shut that end first, when the more people are in the valley. And, if that end's open, Madron and his people could still escape even if Weirden was behind them. I think the more people could move faster than the Iron Men. We must find the more people coming to the far end of the Hidden Valley, Sebastian." "Oh," said Sebastian over his shoulder. They came to the shore and flew south a little way along the beach, and then steeply upward, over the top of the cliffs. The moon was just coming up as they flew over the moor. Sebastian still kept the broomstick low, but after they had flown 2 or 3 miles, he took it up higher. He kept looking down at the dark rocks and the heather below him. "Sebastian's looking for the more people," said Tim. "We must be getting near the Hidden Valley." "I think the valley must be among those rocks over there," said Aaron. They could see a rocky hill in front of them, over to their left. They were flying high now, and the ground was a long way below them. Sebastian flew eastward past the hill, but he was watching the ground more and more closely. Suddenly he gave a little purr, and the broomstick pointed down. Sebastian took them down so steeply that Tim and Aaron had to hang on very hard not to slip off. They just had time to see that there were people below them in the dark heather when the broomstick came to a stop and they scrambled off. Tim and Aaron stood up. A number of men were standing on a path through the heather staring at them. They were dressed in tunics with soft leather trousers tied to their legs with criss-cross bands. Each man had a shield, and each man carried a heavy club. "Are you more people?" gasped Tim. "Who are you and what do you want?" said a tall man with a thick beard who seemed to be the leader. "And where have you come from? Are you a friend of the witches that you ride at night on a broomstick?" "We're not friends of the witches, we're friends of the more people," said Tim. "My name's Tim. I've come to warn you. Weirden knows you're going to the Hidden Valley. He's got Iron Men hiding here. They'll wait till you're in the valley, and then they'll close in on this end so you can't escape. Weirden's following Madron to the other side of the valley with more Iron Men. When Madron gets to the valley, they'll attack. You'll be trapped in the valley." "Have you told Madron this?" cried the leader. "No, not yet. We haven't had time. We're going to find Madron now. Get back to the hills as fast as you can. There are 20 Iron Men this side of the valley. We're going to warn Madron." Sebastian jumped back onto the broomstick and twitched his tail. The broomstick hovered a little way above the ground. The leader of the more men took a step forward. "How do I know I can trust you?" he asked. "You'll have to," said Tim. "There's no time to waste. We've got to go. We've got to stop Madron before he gets to the valley." He sat down on the middle of the broomstick. Aaron was already sitting on the end. Sebastian twitched his tail and the broomstick shot up into the air. It swung round and they flew off towards the far side of a hidden valley. The broomstick flew swiftly through the night. They swung north of the rocky hill where the hidden valley was and west along towards the far end of the hill where the path entered the valley. Aaron and Tim looked anxiously ahead, watching for the Moor people, but it was Sebastian who saw them first. The Moor people were on the path just at the point where it reached the hill. They were at the very beginning of the hidden valley. There wasn't a moment to lose. The broomstick swept down out of the night sky, and then it stopped at Madron's feet. Sebastian kept the broomstick in the air just above the ground. Tim and Aaron stood up. "Tim!" cried Madron. "You've escaped. Did you get the hammer?" "No," cried Tim, "but there's no time to tell you about that now, Madron. You're going into a trap. There are Iron Men at the other end of the valley, and Weirden is behind you with more of them. You've got to get back to the cave." "How do you know?" demanded Madron. "Weirden told me when he thought I was a prisoner," said Tim. "But I'll tell you later. You've got to hurry now." "But the more people from the mountains will be in the valley now," cried Madron. "We must warn them." "We've warned them already," said Tim. "We warned them first. They're on the way back to the mountains. You've got to get back to the cave. You've got to get back now." There was a faint clank from some boulders on the hillside. They looked up and saw the dark shape of an Iron Man against the sky. He was only a few hundred metres away. Madron spun round. "Back!" he cried to more people. "Back for your lives!" The men turned and began to run back along the path across the heather. There was a cry from the hill. The big shape of Weirden stood up from behind a rock, and 14 or 15 Iron Men moved out onto the heather and began running towards them. The Moor men raced back along the path. Tim saw Morag near her grandfather at the back of the group. "Take us to Morag, Sebastian," he gasped, sitting down on the middle of a broomstick. Aaron dropped onto the end of the broomstick and they were off. It took only a few moments for them to catch Morag. "Morag," cried Tim, "get onto the broomstick, take my place. I'll run with the Moor people. You've got to get back and get the stone door open. We haven't got a second to lose." "I'll run," gasped Morag. "I can run faster than you over the moor, Tim." She stopped for a moment. The broomstick hovered beside her. "But I can't open the stone door," said Tim. "Don't be silly, Morag. There's no time to argue. Get onto the broomstick." Madron had stopped too. "Tim's right," he said. "Get on the broomstick, Morag. Get to the stone door and open it. Every moment counts. Keep the door open till we get there." Tim slid off the broomstick and Morag got on. "I'll come with you, Tim," said Aaron, slipping off too. "Don't be silly," said Tim. "You're not strong enough yet, Aaron. You can't run fast enough." "Tim's right. Go with Morag," said Madron. "Come, Tim, run." He set off across the heather, and Tim pelted after him. Aaron glanced over his shoulder. The Iron Men were very close. The moon was up now, and he could see them clearly. He knew that he still hadn't got his full strength back after the silver net. He was much better, but he wouldn't be able to run as fast as Tim. He sat back on the broomstick. Sebastian waved his tail, and they were off. Tim pelted on over the heather. He caught his foot in a root, fell down, picked himself up and ran on. He could hear the clanks of the Iron Men behind him. He glanced over his shoulder. The Iron Men seemed nearer than ever. He ran on and on. He was dropping behind the Moor people. They could run much faster than he could ever across the moor. At first, he managed to keep ahead of the Iron Men, but after a time, he began to tire. His breath came in gasps and his chest hurt. The Moor people were well ahead of him now. He glanced back. The Iron Men were closer still. They ran on their iron legs with no feeling of tiredness. They pounded over the moor like so many machines. They were gaining on him. "I'll never make the cave in time," he thought. "I can't go on like this much longer." He didn't see Sebastian until the little cat swept the broomstick right down alongside him with an excited cry. The Iron Men were only a few metres behind him. "Sebastian!" gasped Tim. He flung himself onto the broomstick and they shot forward just in time. Tim struggled into a sitting position as they flew past the Moor people and into the valley where the cave was. The stone door stood open. Morag and Aaron were standing beside it in the moonlight. Sebastian flew the broomstick right into the cave, through the open door before he stopped. Tim got off. He had scarcely got his breath back and his knees were shaking. "You made it, Tim," cried Aaron. "You made it. Sebastian dropped us and flew." "The Iron Men nearly got me," panted Tim. "Sebastian was just in time." "Here are my Moor people," cried Morag. "Stand out of their way." She turned just outside the door. Tim and Aaron flattened themselves against the side of the cave as the Moor men came racing down the valley and in the stone door. "Close now, stone door, by the magic rowan tree. I am Morag of the Moor. Close door after me," cried Morag after the last man had gone past her. She ran inside. They had one last glimpse of Weirden rushing towards the cliff as the stone door swung slowly towards them. It clicked into place. Half an hour later, all the Moor people in the cave were gathered in the great hall. Tim and Aaron stood at one side against the wall. The men and women of the Moor were all there, talking anxiously together, waiting for Madron to speak. Morag was at her grandfather's side. Madron stepped up onto a stone bench at the end of the hall. He looked slowly round and held up his hand. Everyone stopped talking. Madron's hand dropped to his side. "Men and women of the Moor people," he said in a deep voice. "We have escaped from one trap tonight. Weirden and his iron men plan to catch us in the hidden valley. I do not know how Weirden knew of the meeting, but he learnt of it. Perhaps one of our messengers was captured. We have escaped from one trap, but if we do not act quickly, we shall find ourselves in another. The iron men are waiting for us in the valley outside the stone door. We have some food and water in the caves, but we cannot stay inside them forever. Weirden knows this. The iron men only have to wait, and in the end we shall have to leave or die of starvation. That is what they think. But they are wrong. When we first drove the people of the Moonlight from these caves and planted a magic rowan tree, we made the caves our own. We built a secret passage and a secret door." There was a gasp of surprise from the Moor people, a little buzz of talking. Madron held up his hand again, and the talking stopped. "It has been a well-kept secret," Madron said. "It was meant to be. Only 3 men among you know it. We have kept it a secret, so we could use a passage to escape, if we have to. There are 2 ways open to us now. We shall need the help of the ordinary folk for the first. Tim tried to get Weirden's hammer for us from his smithy on the island, but he failed. If he will go to the island again, we will let him out of the secret door. If he can get the hammer for us, we can smash the Iron Men." Madron turned to Tim. "Will you go, Tim? Will you try once more?" Tim shook his head. "I'm not surprised that you should be afraid," said Madron coldly. Tim swallowed hard. "It's not that," he said, but I don't think you ought to take the headland from the people of the Moonlight, or the caves. It was their home first. They didn't hurt anyone. They only danced in the moonlight, and I don't want to smash the Iron Men." Madron's face grew dark with anger. "So," he cried, "we helped you to free your friends from the stone prisons, and now you've been listening to Weirden the Smith. You've become one of his friends, and one of our enemies." "No, I haven't," said Tim. "I was just his prisoner. But I've seen the people of the Moonlight, and I've seen the Iron Men, and I'm not going to help you smash them." "Then we'll go ourselves and leave you here in the caves till the Iron Men find you," cried Madron angrily. "You can't do that," said Morag. "Tim couldn't open the stone door, and he has helped us. He saved us from the Weirden's trap in the hidden valley." Madron stood still, looking straight at Tim. His face was very stern. There was silence for a few moments, and then he spoke again. "I had forgotten the trap in the hidden valley in my anger," he said slowly. "Well, you will still help us to escape from Weirden then?" Tim nodded. "Yes, of course," he said. "Then I'll tell you the second path which we can follow. We can all escape now, tonight, out of the secret door across the moor to the high hills. We must go back to the mountains, and we should go tonight. The Iron Men are waiting for us now, outside the stone door. By tomorrow, who knows whether Weirden will have guessed there will be another way out of the caves. He is clever enough to guess that, and if he thought we had a way out, he would cover the moor with his Iron Men, and we should never get away. If we're going, we should go tonight. We should go now." There was a murmur among the Moor people, and then one of the women called out, "Yes, Madron, we should go tonight. Let us go back to the high hills. Let us live in peace in our own caves in the mountain." "Very well," said Madron. There was a note of bitterness in his voice. "We will leave these caves and all that we have fought for. We will go back to our hills." He looked across at Tim and Aaron. "There is one last thing you can do for us," he said. "It may be that Weirden knows about the secret door, or that he has Iron Men near the place where it opens onto the moor. If I let you out through the secret door, will you fly over the moor with that cat of yours and see if the way is clear?" "Yes, of course we will," said Tim. course, said Aaron. Then come, said Madron. He looked at the Moor people. Go and get everything you wish to take with you, he said. Bring only what you can carry. I will take the boys to the secret door. He turned to Morag. Bring a broomstick with you, he said. Morag slipped out of the hall and was back a minute or two later with a broomstick in her hand. The Moor people went off into the smaller caves to get their things. Madron picked up a lantern and led Tim and Aaron out of the great hall, past the traveller's room to the end of the passage. Morag went with them, and Sebastian ran along at Tim's heels. Madron whispered something that Tim and Aaron couldn't hear, and a stone door in the wall swung open. Tim and Aaron saw a flight of stone steps leading upwards. They followed Madron up the steps and along a passage cut through the rock to another stone door. This door leads out onto the moor, said Madron. When I open it, fly out on the broomstick over the heather and make sure the way is clear for us. But fly low. Whatever happens, Weirden and his Iron Men mustn't see you. We'll be careful, said Aaron. Madron spoke softly to the stone door, and again the boys could not hear what he said. The door opened and they could see the moonlight shining down on the moor. They looked out cautiously. There was no one in sight. Here's the broomstick, whispered Morag, setting it down on the heather just outside the door. Sebastian ran out and jumped onto one end. We shall wait for you here, said Madron. Go and see that the way is clear. If the Iron Men come, we shall have to shut the door, but we shall wait if we can. Don't be long. Tim and Aaron sat on the broomstick without a word. Sebastian twitched his tail and they flew off over the heather. They were on the moor above the cliff where the stone door was. The moon was moving towards the west, but it was still shining brightly. They could see a long way across the moor. There was no one there. Fly low over the top of the cliff where the stone door is, Sebastian, whispered Tim. Then come right down and we'll have a look. Sebastian flew so low that their feet touched the heather. They came to the edge of the valley and stopped behind a rock. Tim and Aaron got off the broomstick. Wait here, Sebastian, whispered Tim. The boys crept forward. Sebastian had brought them to the top of the cliff, looking into the valley. The stone door was in the cliff below them. They crept towards the edge of the cliff, lay down and looked into the valley below. The Iron Men were all there. Tim counted over 30 of them. They were standing quite still in a big half circle in front of the cliff, waiting. As Tim and Aaron watched, Weirden came up the valley from the west. He was carrying his hammer. Tim caught his breath. Weirden walked right up to the stone door in the cliff below them. He swung his hammer back and struck the door. A great piece of stone broke off and fell with a crash to the floor. Weirden swung his hammer back to strike again. Quick, whispered Aaron urgently. Quick, Tim, we've got to get back, he'll break through. They wriggled backwards well out of sight of the Iron Men and ran doubled up quickly across to the rocks where Sebastian was waiting. Quick, Sebastian, whispered Tim, back to the caves as quick as you can. The broomstick was in the air in a moment. The boys sat on it. Sebastian jumped up on one end and they were off. They heard a crash behind them as another piece of rock broke off under a blow from Weirden's hammer and fell to the ground. Madron and Morag were waiting by the open door. Well? Asked Madron sharply as they swept in. Weirden's attacking the cave door with his hammer, said Tim. It's breaking up. I can hear that, said Madron grimly. We're ready to leave. Is the way ahead clear? It's clear, said Aaron. We've seen no one. All the Iron Men are in the valley with Weirden. Then we'll leave now, said Madron. He turned back into the cave for a moment. Everyone, follow me, he called softly. Kedron, you come last. Make sure everyone has left. Move as silently as you can. The way ahead is clear. Tim and Aaron stood to one side as Madron turned and set out across the moor. One after another, the Moor people came through the little secret door in the rock and followed him. They had warm cloaks, and the men carried clubs and short swords. Some of them had leather bags over their shoulders, but they carried very little with them. Morag broke away from the group and came over to the boys. Tim, she said, you can go south now. I've sent a message to the nightmares for you. If you hide in the hidden valley now, before daylight for the rest of the day, they will meet you there tonight, just after sunset. But how could you send a message? Asked Aaron. By the owls, said Morag. Didn't you know the owls are our messengers? No, said Aaron. We'll fly ahead for a bit first, said Tim. We'll make sure there are no Iron Men in your way. Morag shook her head. The Iron Men are all in the valley by the stone door, she said. They're waiting for Weirden to break it down. Listen. They could hear crash after crash of falling rock echoing in the valley as Weirden's hammer thundered against the stone door. The last of the Moor people slipped through the secret door onto the moor. The man called Kedron whispered a spell and the door closed. The rock looked as if no door had ever been there. Morag handed Tim a leather bag. Here is some food for your journey and the bridles for the nightmare, she said. You will have to spend one night on the way. The owls say that the Old One has left the tower. The nightmares will take you there and leave you for the day. They'll come back for you after sunset. You'll be quite safe in the tower now that the Old One has gone. Goodbye, Tim. Goodbye, Aaron. I shall see you again one day. Thank you for coming north. Come south to see us, said Tim. Perhaps we'll come north again, said Aaron. Tell me if you do, said Morag. My grandfather is angry for the moment, but he knows how much you have helped us. We will still be your friends. She ran off after the others. The Moor people haven't been very grateful, have they? Said Aaron. You risk your life to get that hammer. They're angry because I won't help them smash the Iron Men or to drive the people of the Moonlight away, said Tim. I'm not going to help them smash anyone. The people of the Moonlight lived here long before the Moor people came, Aaron. They don't do any harm. All they want to do is dance at the great stones up there on the headland. Those caves were theirs once. You don't know how fantastic the people of the Moonlight are. They're all silvery in the moonlight like silver glass. No one should drive them away. We didn't know that though, did we? Said Aaron. I'm glad you found out about them in time. So am I, said Tim. And Morag knows that we've helped the Moor people as much as we could. Oh, said Sebastian. He twitched his tail and the broomstick lifted up into the air. You're right, Sebastian, said Tim. We'd better go to the hidden valley. We'll hide among the rocks there for the day and get some sleep. The boys sat down on the broomstick. Sebastian's tail waved in front of them and they flew off over the dark moor into the moonlight. There was no one else in the hidden valley. They flew to both ends looking carefully for any sign of movement, but the hidden valley was empty. The Iron Men were all at the cave. They ate some of Morag's food and then settled down behind some rocks to sleep. They slept all day and woke in the evening to find dark clouds blowing in from the sea. The nightmares came after sunset. 2 great dark blue mares swept out of the night sky and stood waiting for them on the grass. Tim had found 2 silver bridles in Morag's leather bag. He had never put them on the nightmares before, but he'd seen Morag do it and he managed to fit them into place. The stars were just coming out as the boys climbed onto the mare's back. Sebastian jumped from a rock up in front of Tim. Fly, nightmares, fly! Cried Tim. The great horses ran swiftly over the grass. They spread their wings and lifted off into the dark sky. Just before dawn, they glided down onto the ruined tower where they'd first seen the Old One with his silver net. Tim took off the silver bridles and the nightmares left them. There was no one in the tower. The pile of bracken was still there beside the wall. They ate some of Morag's food and lit a fire, then made 2 piles of bracken beside it and lay down to sleep. The boys woke in the evening in time to eat the last of the food before the nightmares came. They went down the hill to the little stream to wash. They saw no one. There was no sign of the Old One, and they saw no other living thing except some sheep on the hills. The nightmares glided down as the stars came out. Tim slipped on their bridles. He lifted Sebastian onto one mare's back and scrambled up behind him, while Aaron got onto the second mare. Aaron was strong enough to mount without Tim's help by this time. The trouble with these adventures is that life seems a bit dull when they're over, doesn't it? Said Aaron, as the horses flew up into the sky and swept along over the moors. Well, I could do with things being a bit dull for a while, said Tim. But I don't expect they'll be dull for long. They never are when the hidden people are about. Aaron laughed. You're right, Tim, he said. Things are never dull for long. I wonder what will happen next. The nightmares flew swiftly southwards. The wind blew the clouds apart, and the moon shone down on the moors. Tim, Aaron and Sebastian were going home.